large numbers of its very poor children to become farmers and farmers' wives in the colonies of the empire, to Canada, to Rhodesia, to Australia. And most of these kids, instead of getting increased opportunity in education, got less. And a lot of them suffered great harm and great damage. And it can't be undone. An apology is not going to bring that undone. It's not going to right the wrong. But it's a big step forward, because nobody would believe these children. And worse than that, nobody cared. And there's nothing better, I think, than having the leader of a country, on behalf of the nation, saying what happened to you kids was wrong and bad, and we're sorry it happened.
But is that
and that's
enough?
going to be
is that
a great...
enough? Is that is an
No,
apology
it's not enough. No.
What else should be done?
It's not enough. Of course it's not enough. Well, a lot of these former kids are still pursuing legal compensation, and I'm pretty confident they'll get something out of that. But even that, it's all too little, too late. It was a terrible wrong, and what can be done is being done. I think the combination of the apology from the Prime Minister and success in some of these compensation claims is as much as can be done. You can only hope that this sort of thing would never happen again, and I'm pleased to see that right around the Western world, all of those ugly institutions run by churches but also by charities have closed down now, and I hope we just never see them again.
What do you think will it take to prevent such abuses from happening again?
Well, sadly, you know, it's the same in America, it's the same in Britain, and it's the same in Australia. But where you have failed parents and failed families, you've got large numbers of children who are in the care system today. And unless they get good foster parents, they are exposed to the same risk today that we were when we were in these institutions decades ago. And I hope that if there's a message out of today for the broader public, it is that we are constantly vigilant and we're caring about what happens to kids today and in the future who don't have the loving arm of a parent around them.
Australia now, where Prime Minister Kevin Rudd delivered an unreserved apology to hundreds of survivors of British child migrants. In an emotional speech in Canberra, Mr. Rudd said no amount of words will compensate for the hurt they've suffered in the country. Thousands of impoverished British children were shipped to Australia in past centuries with the promise of a better life. Instead, many ended up being abused physically and emotionally. You can learn more about Mr. Rudd's apology at the Australian government's website. But how did the British children end up in Australia? David Harrison explains.
Packed off to Australia, they were told for a better life. In reality, many were neglected, abused or used as child labour thousands of miles from home. In Canberra, survivors of the Child Migrants Programme are gathering for an apology from the Australian Prime Minister they've waited a lifetime to hear.
My family, they're so happy that we're actually going to be recognised at last.
In here I've got the file of my departed brother and the file of my departed sister who died while in care, and they'll be coming to the actual apology.
Many of the children shipped to former colonies were told their parents had died. Some were sexually abused in institutions, others forced to work on farms. In Westminster, for the chairman of the Health Select Committee, a written assurance from Gordon Brown that there'll be a full apology for Britain's part in the scandal.
Some of these people in the 60s are finding out they've got mothers alive here in the UK, and they were told, many, many years ago that the mothers were dead. And it's just an horrendous chapter in our history of sending these children. There was asked questions like, would you like to go where the sun shines every day? They put your hand up and they were on the ship within the next few weeks.
A policy which claimed around 150,000 young victims. Their apology is long overdue. David Harrison, ITV News.
British government spokesperson gave CNN a statement saying that officials are in discussions with the Australian government and are working closely with the Child Migrants Trust and the International Association of Former Child Migrants and their families. We will undertake a period of dialogue with those affected prior to a formal apology. We plan to make a more detailed announcement early in the new year.
Britain will formally apologise for its role in resettling thousands of children, mainly without their parents' consent, to Australia and Canada in the last century. Meanwhile, the government in Australia is due to make a national apology on Monday to 500,000 children who were placed in foster homes and institutional care between the 1930s and the 1970s. They were promised a better life, but many later complained of physical and sexual abuse in care homes and on farms. Nick Bryant reports now from Canberra.
The story of the British child migrants shipped to Australia has been described as a shameful history of deceit, lies and official neglect. The children were commonly told they were orphans, only to find out decades later that their parents were still alive. Most were deported without the consent of their mothers and fathers. Sandra Anker was brought to Australia at the age of 6. Tricked into thinking she was embarking on a great adventure, she became a castaway of the British Empire.
We've had a horrendous life. It took years and years of misery, of not knowing where we come from, who we were, being denied our birthright of being British. It's really, really been horrendous.
At Parliament House in Canberra, the Australian government will say sorry to British child migrants on Monday morning, and that appears to have prompted a change of heart in London. On the eve of the Australian apology, Downing Street has indicated that Gordon Brown will say sorry as well, sometime in the new year after consulting with the victims. But they've already complained that he's been shamed into action by the Australians. It's a question we put to Britain's new High Commissioner in Canberra, Baroness Amos.
I think we have all been shocked by this part of our history, and I think it's important that we're apologising now.
It's over 20 years since the scandal was first uncovered, and over 7,000 British child migrants still live in Australia. For them, the planned apology is way overdue. Nick Bryant, BBC News, Canberra.